All right, everybody, welcome back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Dustin William. I have my co-host with me, Whitestone.
I shall now attempt to show how the most important of these principia have been crystallized into the pithy form of maxims and have influenced and developed that grand system of truth known as equity jurisprudence.
The power is neutral. It's sitting in the quintessence until you invoke it. All right, welcome everybody back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I am your host and owner and producer over at True Life Productions. You can find all of our work at truelifeproduction.com. And over there, you can find work that I've already done on a subject we are going to cover today in my series All Aboard. If you've watched any of the episodes, if anybody's watched any of the episodes over there, I actually have 3 episodes on the guy we're going to talk about today, Mr. James Gordon Bennett. So go check them out. They are more produced, more refined, more fancy ways to take in the information. But this is it's going to be a lot of the same information, just a lot more detailed than I went into over there. But once you're done with that, you can go to Article 3 Articulations, check out the couple episodes I have over there, where you can find the most comprehensive breakdown of the slaughterhouse cases there is on the internet. So, but that gets us through the business for today and gets us into what we're going to talk about. We have made it all the way to episode 20, and we are going to start breaking into my Orphan Trains research. And before we start breaking into this, let's just introduce our co-host, Whitestone. How are you, man?
Doing great. I'm really interested to see how a lot of this ties into, eventually, like a lot of the propaganda around orphan trains, like little Orphan Annie and everything else that kind of came about in the early 1900s.
Yeah, all the orphan propaganda media that they used to release. There's a reason that, they're always trying to make media you will relate to. So, of course, that's why there was so much orphan media.
Yeah, and who's going to say no to little Orphan Annie?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's good. It's good. They're good. That's when propaganda was still good. They've really fallen off these days, I will say. They're not near as good at it since they lost Mr. Edward Bernays, Yeah. Half-assing it, you might say.
Yeah, well, no, I think so many people are so demoralized and so overly saturated that perhaps the amount of effort that they have to put in is not as much as it used to, because they pretty much have their whole body in the door now.
Yeah, it's hard. It's getting harder and harder to kick them out. That's for sure. But that's our job. That's what we are here to do, is to edify everybody and point them in the right directions to freedom and getting around these people. And that's a big reason why we want to talk about the guy we're going to talk about today, because this is a guy that he's interesting, and he's not a very well-known guy in history, which is one reason why I wanted to look into him so much. And the reason I'm lumping him in with my Orphan Trains research is because he founded a newspaper called the New York Herald in 1835, all the way back in 1835. And that newspaper went from 1835 all the way until 1924. He founded it. He sold it to his son. His son ran it all the way until 1924, when they sold it and it merged with another company. I can't remember off the top of my head. And his son, actually, I can't wait to get into his son. I haven't done too much research on him, but he is fucking wild, dude. You know who Gog and Magog are, right?
I've heard those names, but I don't know exactly what what they reference.
So Gog and Magog are in the Bible, and they're like the two who are like supposed to bring on the apocalypse, right? They're basically like the figures of the end of the world. So
that's a big one. I should know that.
You're right. So like Bennett Senior, he was very very behind the scenes. He didn't let I'm almost positive he was a Freemason. I'm pretty sure I proved that out in All Aboard. I can't remember though, but he was very behind the scenes with it. And like, he did not let any of like the occult shit get out into his newspapers or anything like that. His son was the complete opposite. He was totally one of these sons of rich kids, and he just spread this esoteric shit all over the place. And it's kind of wild to see the stark contrast. But he came by it honestly because Mr. Bennett Sr. here, and this isn't something we're going to talk about today. This is something we'll talk about in later episodes because once we get into our talk about the Civil War and stuff, he's going to come up a lot because he was a very prominent figure back then. Oh shoot, what was I just talking about? Where was I going? That
His let's see. He publishes his first paper. It was the four-page penny paper called the
the
New York
Mormons,
Herald,
the
19
Mormons.
or
I
1835.
I remember the Mormons. So this guy, there's an entire website. I wish I would have pulled it up. I can't remember the name of it, but there's an entire website dedicated to James Gordon Bennett Sr., the New York Herald, and all of his articles dedicated to the Mormon religion. He was obsessed with Mormons and the establishment of like a Mormon state in Utah.
Well, I will say that I know somebody that was a Harvard business grad who had told me that. Now, I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but I'm sure most people would agree that the Mormon religion is basically a private equity firm masquerading as a religion. And so if you've got, this guy here who's into the occult and has got an interest in some sort of banking and also works in the newspaper, it wouldn't surprise me that he's going to be interested in a private equity firm masquerading as a religion. And I'm sure there's some occult things going on in the background.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And with what we're going to find out about this guy today, it's just going to become even more interesting because like I said, like Whitestone was saying, this guy's connected. He founded a huge newspaper. It was actually the biggest newspaper of its time. It was the most circulating paper all the way up until they sold it, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it was a very popular paper back in the day. And he also had ties with banking, as we'll see, and not public facing ties, as we'll find out. He was very covert about it, just like he was everything else. So without further ado, I guess let's start getting into this guy. Unless you got anything you want to add, we'll start jumping into who this guy was.
No, I'm going to let you take the reins and I'm going to bring up the caboose. So,
Okay. All right, sounds good. So what we're going to cover today is from the time that Bennett immigrates to North America. Well, it really is from his birth, but there's really not much information available on his birth. And everything that is available um, on James Gordon Bennett from the time of his birth all the way until 1835, when he founded the New York Herald, is all from this guy named Isaac Clark Prey. And in Mr. Prey's work, he even admits in there he did not consult anybody of his family. He never talked to Bennett personally. He never talked to his son. He basically, the only place he obtained information about Bennett is from the New York Herald itself and like other articles written about James Gordon Bennett Sr. And this book that he wrote is like a certified grade A ball washing of who James Gordon Bennett Sr. was. I
well, yeah, he
forget.
basically borrowed his own propaganda and fed it back as fact.
Yeah, exactly. And like, oh yeah, the memoirs of James Gordon Bennett. That's what that's what the book was. And it basically all is just it's just a ball washing of Bennett and who he was because he was an absolute fucking nut job, dude. Like if you look into this guy and like we were just talking off the call, another reason how Bennett tied because I'm tying Bennett into my Orphan Trains research, and another reason he ties into there is because he has a lot of issues with this guy named Ned Buntline, who is another newspaper guy who basically brought us everything that we know of the Wild West today. He was the guy who created the Wild West, basically, and he was heavily affiliated with this group named the Know Nothings. They were a secret society who's affiliated with a whole bunch of stuff in the South, but basically the media is what drove the Orphan Trains, and we will prove that out in later episodes. But I wanted to start. You know me, I always like to build the context of everything. And when I started looking into the Orphan Trains, I wanted to know what was happening before the first Orphan Train actually took off. Okay, I wanted to know like what was the political environment? What's the media environment? What are people saying? What are they doing? What's going on with immigration before the trains? What's going on in Europe? And this is basically where I landed. Is a lot of it is focused on the New York Herald and media propaganda placed out through the New York Herald. And another thing that James Gordon Bennett Sr. is credited with is sensationalizing the media. And through the sensationalization of the media, he basically spread it with a murder we're going to talk about um, in the second hour with the Helen Jewett murder. Okay, so the media is a hinge point for everything that we know today. That's how, and especially newspapers, and what we'll find out is something called the penny newspapers, were how propaganda spread back in the day. And James Gordon Bennett is basically the one who figured out how to spread it most efficiently. So but before I get rambling on too much longer, let's start building a chronology of Mr. James Gordon Bennett Sr. here. And so he was born in 1795, September 1st, 1795. James Gordon Bennett was born September 1, 1795 at New Mill near Banffshire in north of Scotland, the eldest son of a land-holding Roman Catholic parents at a time when Catholicism were a when Catholics were a small minority in Presbyterian dominated Scotland. His parents intended him for the priesthood, and around the age of 15, he was sent to Catholic seminary at Aberdeen, attending Blair's College. He later left church embittered, blaming it for the treatment of his younger brother Cosimo, who died in seminary. So, just right off the get, like I told you, the only thing available about Bennett is a couple of like Encyclopedia Britannica articles where they say he comes from a prominent Catholic family from Scotland, but that's basically all you can find out about him. A prominent Catholic family. I don't even think I know the names of his parents actually, because there's just um, nothing known about him. But a thing that Mr. Prey claims in his book, which we have to take it with a grain of salt because we don't really know because he didn't actually talk to anybody in his family, but he claims that Bennett is from a almost a royal bloodline that from William the Conqueror. I guess William the Conqueror was supposed to give land to a family called the Benoits in Scotland, and who had a castle over there. And that is apparently where James Gordon Bennett comes from. Is basically, and it says right here, a landholding Roman Catholic parents in Scotland. And that's something we'll get into later. But Scotland's where the Protestant Reformation, a big portion of the Protestant Reformation happened. So him being Roman Catholic in Scotland is a big deal. But anyways, I don't want to harp on that point too much. I'm just it's interesting his background, where he comes from, and how there's not very much information on it. So, anyways, from 1814 to 1819, sorry. Having turned away from the priesthood, Bennett spent these years traveling in Scotland and living for a time in Glasgow, the country's growing commercial port and chief point of embarkation for immigrants. There he read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, recently reprinted in Glasgow, and by his own account, he was drawn to America as the land he had read about. At roughly 25, he resolved to cross the Atlantic. So, in 1819, he immigrates to America. Bennett sailed in spring of 1819 for Halifax, Nova Scotia, reportedly with about $25 to his name. He taught bookkeeping in Halifax, then moved to Portland, Maine, took a teaching post in a village of Addison, and continued to Boston, where he found work as a clerk and proofreader in the shop of a bookseller and printer. His first contact with the printing trade. So he immigrates from Scotland to Canada, ends up in Portland, Maine, and becomes a proofreader. And that's like his first little initiation into the media. He's a proofreader and a clerk for a bookseller. And I do think it's interesting that Mr. Bennett claims that the reason he wanted to come to America is because of Benjamin Franklin and his autobiography. I just think that's a cute little thing that he threw in there. But in my All Aboard series, I go a little bit deeper into this actually. And when he gets to America, it's claimed by Mr. Prey that he meets up with this poor farmer, and basically Bennett takes the money from the farmer and like starts his own business with it, and then is like supposed to pay the farmer back, but Bennett never pays the farmer back. So he just starts out as a scumbag. Which
Oh, why am I not surprised?
right, isn't that hilarious? Yeah. So you can watch if anybody's interested in that. I go into it a little bit more in detail at All Aboard. But yeah, that's how Bennett starts coming to America. And as we see, this trend is going to continue as we go through this chronology. So do you got anything you want to add before we keep going on this?
No, it's just interesting that it seems like he started to get into the more of like the editorial shaping what it is that's in print at a young age, because that's going to tee him up for later on in life when he starts pushing out his propaganda, because he started doing that when he was younger.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can see this kind of slow progression, and he kind of he's a very smart guy, and he sees what's going on around him, and he's an opportunist. That's exactly what he is. That's what I'll say is he's an opportunist. He knows what's going on around him. He's a little ninja. He's just checking out the scene, and he knows the right moves to make. And honestly, it kind of seems like he has a little help behind the scenes. I have no proof of this, but as we'll see, he's talking to the banks. He's Roman Catholic background. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? We'll just see, and
Yeah,
you can come to
it's
your own
just
conclusions.
these people are always plugged in somewhere, and they're always getting opportunities and money and a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. And yeah, I'll solidify that point as we get a little bit further into this. But so from 1820 to 1823, from Boston, James Gordon Bennett Sr. moved to New York and then to Charleston, South Carolina, where Aaron Smith Wilmington of the Charleston Courier hired him to translate French and Spanish language news and dispatches arriving by ship. So he was hired by a translator in Charleston, South Carolina. And he's obviously very educated because he's translating both French and Spanish. So, he was pretty well trained somewhere. But an early apprenticeship in the deadline journalism under an editor known for prizing speed. After about 10 months, he returned to that's the editor he's working for, somebody known for he was prized for speed. And after about 10 months, he returned to New York City around 1823, scraping by on bookkeeping, proofreading, and freelance writing. So this is you see the slow progression as he's getting into the media here. He's smart, he's making the right moves, just moving up in the ladder here. So 1825, Bennett Sr. gained a foothold at the National Advocate, a Tammany Hall connected paper edited by Mordecai Manuel Noah, and in 1825 took over a struggling weekly, the New York Courier, described as the first Sunday paper in the United States. The venture failed, and Bennett soon found himself writing for Noah, whose paper had become the New York Inquirer. So, like I just keep saying, he's just kind of moving up the ladder here. He runs up into this Noah guy. He's going to become important here pretty soon.
That was the first Sunday paper in 1825 in the U.S.
Was the New York Courier. Yes, the very first
Because
Sunday paper.
in 1822, the Sunday Times in London was founded. So even across the ocean, there you can see
Oh,
that
okay.
newspapers and stuff across the board are all coming up at the same time, and I guarantee there's a relation there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has to be, it has to be. And yeah, and like as we're seeing is Bennett's right here at the ground floor of everything. And yeah, that's interesting that I didn't know that the papers were starting up like Sunday papers anyways. Obviously there was newspapers before this, but yeah, there's an obvious correlation there because that was what 1822. So yeah, just 3 years
1822,
before.
and it's interesting because Sunday was usually, in the Christian world, was reserved as the Sabbath, where you would engage in devotionals or meditation or contemplation or something like that. But what they started doing is they started putting these propaganda pieces out on Sunday to detract your mind away from that and start to focus on whatever it is that they want to tell you.
Yeah, and now what's the big thing on Sunday? everybody's watching football.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're taking up your Sunday somehow, some way,
Yeah.
for
All
sure.
circus and no bread.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, a detail I didn't include in here, but I did include in All Aboard is another way that he cut his teeth for these Tammany Hall figures is talking about the bank crisis in 1825, 1826 for the National Advocate. That's the Tammany Hall connected paper. Do you know anything about Tammany Hall, Whitestone?
I remember, when I was younger, Tammany Hall was, he was the big, that was like the big ring of industrialists that kind of had control over everything.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. That was like the big business people back in the day, and they were known for being corrupt. Like that's
Yep.
where like basically political corruption is like that. When people think about political corruption, that's like the first thing to think about is Tammany Hall.
Was
And here
that
we
when
got,
Boss Tweed? I remember.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
exact time. Yep. If anybody's seen the Gangs of New York, that time is exactly when Bennett is huge. And there's actually another guy named Horace Greeley who Bennett was kind of a bully to him, honestly. But Greeley was like, he was kind of a doofus anyways, and he was used by the political parties and shit. And he ran for president one time and got completely smashed, realized everybody used him, and then he died like a year later. It's actually a really sad story, but
Yeah.
yeah, Bennett is right, central to that whole story and this the Tammany Hall thing. Like I said, you watch Gangs in New York. It's pretty accurate. The violence is obviously, pretty exaggerated, but the story is pretty accurate. It's a pretty good story. It's one of my favorite movies. But so that's going to bring us to 1827. On April 27th, 1827, Bennett's light sketch Shaking Hands appeared in the New York Enquirer, and Noah noted a jump in circulation after it ran. Bennett's growing reputation soon carried him to Washington, where he became, by most accounts, the first full fledged Washington correspondent in American journalism, filing lively reports on Congress, the tariff, the Second Bank of the United States, and the social scene. Um, Oh yeah, that's just a note for me. So yeah, he gets he publishes this little this light sketch called Shaking Hands. I didn't get a chance to pull it actually. I don't even know if it's actually still available, but he publishes this and then grows, Noah finds he says, "Hey, you're jumping, bro." And then so obviously he's getting more jobs after that, which carries him all the way to Washington D.C. and he is credited with being the first full-fledged Washington correspondent, which I obviously something very interesting. So that is going to bring us to he. Um, this is where a couple of papers are going to merge. So between 1829 and 1831, Noah's New York Enquirer, that is the paper that Bennett's already working at, merges with James Watson Webb's Morning Courier to form the Morning Courier and New York Enquirer. With Webb as publisher, James Gordon Bennett served as associate editor from 1829 to 1832 and made it one of the most influential papers in New York. Webb, like Noah before him, denied Bennett bylines and absorbed his work, an experience Bennett later cited when he gave his own reports like reporters their names in print. In the summer of 1831, Bennett toured upstate New York, partly in the company of Martin Van Buren, gathering material that produced, among other pieces, an early two-part feature, Mormonites, published August 31, September 1st, 1831. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I was just talking about that earlier, his relationship with the Mormons and Martin Van Buren is pretty I didn't is Martin Van Buren a Mormon? Do you know that?
That I don't know. I can do some
Yeah, why don't you look
background
because
real
I
quick.
he was president, right? Or did he just run for president?
No, he was president.
Okay, yeah, because I don't think we had a Mormon president, but I don't know. Apparently,
At least
he's
not
associated with some.
publicly.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's why I find that so interesting because I'm like, he would obviously be publicly facing a Christian because all of our presidents are, but maybe behind the doors he's a Mormon because that's an interesting little detail right there. Um, so yeah, so that is gonna bring us to um Associate. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so that's he's the associate editor of this paper after the merger. All right. So the oh no, don't want to do that. Let me get so that brings us to 1829. And this is the paper we talked about. The the merger that we just talked about, the Morning Courier and New York Enquirer. That's the newspaper they just made in 1829. James Watson Webb merged his paper with Noah. Uh, Bennett served as the associate editor and guiding light. Webb's serving correspondent placed him in direct contact with the bank war cast, Nicholas Biddle, Bennett, Amos Kendall, and Noah among them. So in 1830, um, this is what's going to open up something called the bank wars that most people know is between Nicholas Biddle and our president, Andrew Jackson. And this goes on from about 1830 to about 1836. And as we're going to find out, Bennett is behind the scenes in this entire thing. So, um, did you find out if he was a Mormon?
So what's interesting is English was not his first language. It was Dutch, actually. And he was
Ah,
affiliated with the Dutch Reformed Church. Let's see. He famously stated, quote, "I am not a subscriber to any creed," end quote, and rejected the gloomy theology of the Orthodox, preferring a personal, non-denominational approach to faith that emphasized the moral teachings of the Bible over strict doctrine.
oh, so he was a Mormon. So he was a Mormon.
I think
Yeah.
that's a way to say, you know what, I just kind of believe in everything, and I talk to God, because that's a really good general way to satisfy people. And in the background, your relationship with God can be whatever you want, including some of the weird stuff that we're into.
Yeah, and that's a very Freemasonic approach to it, I will say too, because that's how they do it.
Non-denominational, not
Yeah.
strict or anything, but I totally believe. Please vote.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, interesting. Well, here we are learning out loud. Nice. Good one. All right. So yeah, that makes a little more sense on why he would come out with something called the Mormonites after he's touring with Martin Van Buren, who I assumed was a Christian. But so that's going to bring us to 1830. So from 1830, Nicholas Biddle, who was the president of the Second Bank of the United States, launched a nationwide campaign to secure the bank's re-charter, lending to editors and funding pro-bank printing on a scale later estimated in the high tens of thousands of dollars, some of it distributed quietly on his own authority. In the same period, Bennett, though working at a Jacksonian paper, opened the correspondence with Biddle that would outlast his time at the Courier and Enquirer. Bennett sent the banker confidential reports on New York banking sentiment for several years while his paper publicly opposed recharter, hinting he could make the paper a most useful engine for the bank if he were in editorial control. The bulk of his surviving early letters are filed in Nicholas Biddle's papers. So, if you ever get a chance, you can go there. The Nicholas Biddle papers. I can't remember where those are actually at, but that's where you can read all about this relationship that we're about to learn about. So, yeah, so we are actually,
Is this all
yeah,
taking place mostly in New York?
yes, yes.
There's a lot of little papers that were kind of coming out around that time. Like the New York Sun came out in 1833, and it's just interesting that like across Europe and here in the United States, you're seeing all these little tiny papers pop up.
Yes, yeah, yeah. This is a an interesting time. Yeah, as that's kind of how Bennett cut his teeth is something through. Actually, I didn't really touch on that too much here, but I did touch on it in All Aboard. Something called the penny papers. That was something that was becoming really popular at this time. Well, actually we haven't got there because that's actually what Bennett based his paper on. Was he found there was this guy who was getting really popular through these things called penny papers, which were basically it was basically like a one-page thing like folded into 4 sheets, and they would just print on each side of it. And it was just a really fast and easy way to get papers out. So, and printing presses are becoming a lot more popular and a lot cheaper to come about. As we'll find out, Bennett started the New York Herald with only $500 of capital. And, and built it into this giant media empire. So back in the day, that it was. Oh, and this is actually also after like, um, I guess you could say the deregulation of the media, because for a long time, especially before the United States independence, you actually had to get a writ from a king in order to be able to even publish anything into a paper or anything like that. So, yeah, that's it's there was a lot of papers coming up, which is another reason why Bennett is so important. Because, like I said, we've really been building a narrative here where he's just kind of this little ninja making the right moves at exactly the right times. And maybe he's not just making the right moves at the right times. Maybe he has a little help behind the scenes too. Because yeah, we're gonna jump. Okay. Yeah. So we'll go. Now I have pulled a couple of excerpts from a book called Bennett's New York Herald and the Rise of the Popular Press. And that was printed in 1989 by James L. Crothamel. And a lot of this information that I'm getting here, that is where this is coming from, is Bennett's New York Herald and the Rise of the Popular Press, which is a great paper. This is a great book. It's a quick read too. It's only like 200 pages, but in there, he talks about the relationship we've been talking about a lot. So what I'm going to do is just read a few of these excerpts into the record here, and we are going to learn the exact anatomy of what was going on behind the scenes here. So when when he arrives back in New York, Bennett sent Nicholas Biddle an analysis of the political situation as he had observed it in his travels, especially attitudes in New England towards the Bank of the United States. These reports continued, along with advice about recharter. As before, Bennett was sending confidential reports to the bank at the same time. The editorial policy of his paper opposed recharter. In late 1829, the Courier and Enquirer posed a series of damning questions on the issue, furnished by Amos Kendall of Jackson's Kitchen Cabinet, which forecast Jackson's opposition to the bank in his annual message a week later. So yeah, there's Amos Kendall guy. He's actually in Jackson's cabinet, and he's working with the paper too, and having a front-facing issue. But I'm sure this Kendall guy can't be innocent. I'm sure him and they're working at the same paper. So
I will
all
say
right.
that last name Kendall is a massive automobile dealership. I don't call it strain or chain, at least out here in the Pacific Northwest. And so I was just making the point that these names are everywhere.
Oh yeah. Kendall, yeah, that's a name that comes out all over the place. And I actually haven't done too much research into Amos Kendall, but maybe we'll get into him a little bit later because he does seem to pop up quite a bit here. But so Bennett continued to write articles against the bank at the same time. He was supplying Biddle with information and implying that he would support the bank if he were in editorial control of the paper. He would then be able to make it a quote most useful engine to forward useful measures. A month later, he directly asked Biddle for $30,000 to buy half of the paper, and again alluded to pro bank stand he could then take. Nothing came of these overtures. Okay, so that is Bennett. That's his first time asking for money. So, moving on. This is from the same book. Bennett was acting in his own self-interest in promoting the merger. He believed that the new did I do this out of order? Yeah, oops, this was supposed to go before that. But anyway, sorry. Bennett was acting in his own self-interest in promoting the merger. He believed that the new paper would be acceptable to the leadership at Tammany Hall, which disturbed Webb, and hoped that Tammany would ask him to start a new party organ in the city. He tried to undermine the newly merged paper, telling prominent New Yorkers that party leaders were dissatisfied with the merger and lacked confidence in Webb. When he failed to attract support for his own party paper, Bennett proposed that the local party appoint a political editor, himself, no doubt, to control the editorial policy of the Courier and Enquirer. Webb was aware of Bennett's scheming. He wrote to state party leader Azariah C. Flagg that, quote, Bennett will never issue the first number of his paper, unquote. To check Bennett, Webb recommended to Flagg that the party issue a circular recommending the Courier and Enquirer to the party faithful. Bennett was without regular employment after the merger until September 5th, 1829, when he joined the Courier Enquirer as associate editor. In the interim, he probably lived off savings and occasional freelancing and perhaps a retainer from Nicholas Biddle, president of the Bank of the United States. While still on the Enquirer staff, before the merger, when the editorial policy of the paper was decidedly opposed to the bank, Bennett began sending reports to Biddle about banking conditions and sentiment in New York, explaining why so many of New York's banks were hostile to Biddle's institution. He left Biddle with the pessimistic impression that the bank could not be rechartered in its present form. Bennett reported to Biddle for several years, although in public he firmly opposed the bank recharter. So that's a little background into even before there was an official merger of these two newspapers, Bennett's already trying to become the political correspondent, and so he can gain favor in Tammany Hall and get this bank recharter and get the bank recharter. But obviously, he can't do this in the public face. So this is just a little, kind of a behind the mask moment on how the media works, and everybody acts like the media was so much better back in these days. This isn't freaking 1829. Yeah. So
and the very fact that they're referring to it as a party paper, which means that it's an editorial or a paper that is dishing out information and opinions that are along party lines. And this, I think, is important because nowadays people think that the news, it's objective and it's well researched and here for you, authoritative. It's like, no, it's not. It's a lot of look at just as an example, like Fox News or CNN. They're obviously partisan party entertainment networks, which are not giving you news. They're giving you their spin on takes and events that support the party narrative. And so it's not news. And so they were doing this back then too.
Yeah. And this goes to show you they were just even more open with it back then. They just called themselves party papers back then. They were just like, yeah, we support this party, we support this party. But obviously behind the scenes, they're like, yeah, we're doing whatever we can to get this bank rechartered. It doesn't matter what you're a part of, It's absolutely insane. And yeah, like I said, this is 1829. So, the more things change, the more things stay the same. But they do not have a public they just don't have the fine veneer of a public party policy. They're supposed to, they passed that law back in the 70s where they had to put both sides on the on the news or whatever. I can't remember what the exact law was, but that just goes to show they'll say one thing and do another right behind your back. So that brings us to so this is the really interesting part of this entire thing. So this is a little bit of reading, but I'm just going to read this into the record because it is a very important part. It's basically what this whole narrative I'm spinning hinges on right here. So until 1831, the Courier and Enquirer opposition towards the recharter was mild, and the pieces that Bennett wrote about the bank were approved by Noah and Webb. Then on February 5th, 1831, he wrote a slashing attack on the bank, describing it as a vast, corrupt political machine, buying and selling votes, bribing officials and editors, and erecting within the states and the Union a new general government, an imperium in imperia, unknown to the Constitution, defying its powers, laughing at the restrictions, scorning its principles, and pointing to its golden vaults as the necessary weapon that will excuse its behest whenever it shall be necessary to carry them into action. These charges of political corruption were repeated a day later, and in March, Bennett called the bank a force for disunity in the nation. After this, the paper said nothing about the bank for a month, On April 9, the Courier and Enquirer's position changed, and it supported a modified charter renewal. Bennett was silenced, and Webb made his own recharter views, those of his newspaper. What had caused this change? Bennett's negotiations to buy a share of the paper for which he was unable to raise the money resulted in the sale of a larger share to Noah on April 4th, 1831. The money, however, had been indirectly furnished to Noah by the bank through Silas E. Burroughs, a confidence man, speculator, lobbyist, and influence peddler. Burroughs met Webb and Noah at Albany and loaned Noah $15,000, which he told the editors had come from his wealthy father. Unknown to them, he had received the money from Biddle, whom he had convinced that a loan to Noah would modify the Courier and Enquirer's opposition to recharter. The resulting modification had led to New York City's banks led to the resulting modification had led the New York City banks that opposed recharter to cut off Webb and Noah from their usual sources of credit there. The editors received 2 more loans from Biddle's bank in August and December, not knowing that the bank was the source of their earlier loan from Burroughs. Their newspaper, in the meantime, had been almost silent about the recharter. Bennett was muzzled on the bank issue, but Webb found other matters to keep his associates busy. That summer, Bennett was sent on tour of Western New York, and he sent back to the Courier and Enquirer a series of descriptive letters from the country he traveled with Martin Van Buren a part of the way and kept his diary to record his impressions. Some of this information he passed on to Biddle, emphasizing that the bank was unpopular there because it was misunderstood and the pro-bank sentiment did not have proper direction.
Wow.
So, isn't that interesting?
So they're basically getting insider information.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then, yeah. So they're
What
getting
year? Sorry, what year was that in? The 1831.
Yeah, April 4th, 1831 is when they received the first payment from Burroughs. Yep.
Interesting, because there was the Panic of 1837.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, financial and economic panic, inflated land values, wildcat banking, and paper speculation. So I'm sure that, there's something going on there where they're trying to restructure the banking. So they have to create a panic. And it's interesting that happened in, around 1837, because 100 years later, they're going to do the same thing in 1933.
Well, yeah, it's in 1836 that the bank's charter expires. So immediately after that is when the panic happens, obviously.
Interesting.
Yeah, because obviously, the money gets redistributed, and then basically that's when money goes from, like they said, Chester Street to Wall Street. It moves from the second bank to the bankers up on Wall Street. Which is true, but I still agree with Jackson's decision to get rid of the charter of the second bank because just bankers are evil, I guess.
Yeah.
But as you see here, the money changes in where this paper is getting their money changes. Once the money changes, they change their stance. And that just goes to show you when you see these newspapers and they suddenly change a stance on something, and you're like, oh, I wonder why that happened. They must have had a change of heart. They didn't have a change of heart.
The motivations have changed. I've had an overnight change of heart to the tune of $50,000.
Yeah, they didn't have a change of heart. They had a change of money. And this is just a little proof right there. But what this does lead to, this ultimately leads to Bennett leaving party politics. And yeah, I'll just read this into the record too, because this kind of ties us up into a bow, because this is, like I said, after this is really the reason Bennett leaves party politics and he starts his own paper. So one of these was an opportunity to buy into Francis B. P. Blair's Washington Globe, the new national organ of the Jackson administration. The venture buying one half of the profitable paper was suggested by Secretary of the Treasury Lewis McLean, whose motives appear to have been ira- uh, irration that the Globe had not press not pressed very hard for Van Buren's nomination for vice president and anger at Blair's strident anti-bank editorials. Bennett discussed the proposition with Van Buren and Governor Macy and sought aid from Nicholas Biddle. He also asked Secretary of the Navy Levi Woodbury to intercede. Quote, I should like such a position remarkably well. Bennett wrote, I think I could add a good deal of reputation and patronage to the Globe. The approaching controversy with South Carolina will require every power of mind to manage it with success, argument, wit, good humor, courtesy, point, eloquence, all and everything mainly and gentlemanly, which give character to a newspaper. But the overture came to nothing. Blair was not ready to part with a piece of his profitable paper. So this is basically Bennett trying to get out of his situation right now with the Courier and Enquirer, because as we see, it's not going very well. So almost immediately, another opportunity came to hand. In January 1833, Bennett began work at the Philadelphia Jacksonian Daily, the Pennsylvanian, and on May 24th, he became the editor of the Pennsylvanian, was established in summer of 1832, and was a typical mercantile paper. Over half of its 28 columns were filled with advertisements, and most of its news was directed at local merchants. Under Bennett's direction, it devoted more attention to crime and police courts, and it took a strong anti-Negro and anti-abolitionist position that was always characteristic of Bennett. Yes, Bennett was always anti-Negro. He has some absolutely crazy news articles during the Civil War. But you know, honestly, some of the stuff I agree with. He was a political correspondent, and he was he was good at his job. I'll just say that. But Bennett realized that his day on the Pennsylvanian were numbered, and he again sought assistance from Nicholas Biddle's administration officials in the Pennsylvanian. He told the banker quote, we're attacking, quote, my conduct and my pecuniary resources. My friends must support me or they will break me. He had a chance to buy the New York Standard, but needed $50,000. The KC kitchen cabinet, that's Jackson's kitchen cabinet, must be dispersed or the bank will. If I can get hold of the Standard, I can do it easily. I can make it appear that the funds came from Regency Bank of New York and Albany. Not a moment is to be lost. Biddle did not respond to this letter or to a personal visit. So right there, he's literally trying to do this subversively. He's like, look, dude, you can give me money and I'll just say it's from another bank over here. And obviously he's got a relationship with that bank too, or else they wouldn't let him do that. But as expected, Bennett's connection with the Pennsylvanian was severed on November 30th, 1833. He charged that Amos Kendall and the irresponsible cabal stationed at Washington were the prime movers, and he threatened an exposure. A few days later, 2 columns of the Enquirer's editorial page were filed with Bennett's charges that Kendall and a group of corrupt stock manipulators dominated the administration, dictated its banking policies, and forced him out of the Pennsylvanian. Bennett never again was a party editor. This experience had taught him that he could not comply with party discipline, that he could not march to another man's beat. He returned to New York and for the next year and a half waited for an opportunity, supporting himself by freelancing, again, mostly by George P. Morris's New York Mirror. Perhaps Nicholas Biddle provided a subsidy. At any rate, Bennett kept Biddle informed of the New York political scene. The time was ripe. He told the banker to work out a compromise on a modified recharter. Regency's leaders in Albany seemed willing. Anyways, so that was a big mouthful to cover the reason on why eventually Bennett, quote unquote, got out of party politics, and he will, basically move to the beat of his own drum right now, because like we covered before, he split with the New York of Webb and Noah's paper over the bank recharter, and then after that, he's going out there trying to get more work. He can't he can't get any work out there, so that's going to lead him basically to start his own paper, because he wants to move to the beat of his own drum. And basically, that's the background of what is known as the bank wars. Um, and basically, what starts the whole thing of the bank wars is Bennett's, behind the scenes action, really with Biddle and trying to give him advice. And he's really behind the scenes pushing this entire thing. So, you got anything you want to add, Whitestone?
No, not yet. I'm just I'm looking at background timelines here, trying to see if I can draw any salient points, but they got nothing yet.
Okay, right on, man. Yeah, so we just got a few more minutes here. So I'm just gonna, this is from the Philadelphia Encyclopedia, and this is just kind of a little overview. Um, this is Nicholas Biddle right here. That's the president of the Second Bank of the United States. And basically, um, yeah, so in 1833, President Andrew Jackson ordered that the federal deposits be removed from the Bank of the United States, a controversial action that ultimately led to the bank's destruction. This cartoon, published in 1834, this one right here, is a satire on the failure of the combined efforts of Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, John Calhoun, and Nicholas Biddle to thwart Jackson's Treasury policy. It is one of the few satires favorable to Jackson on the bank issue. To the right, beneath the columns marked Pennsylvania, Virginia, New York, and Georgia, sits Andrew Jackson smoking a clay pipe and convening with Jack Downing. Behind him are strong boxes of deposits, the topmost of which is marked a foundation for a national bank. Leaning on them is a figure of liberty with a staff, liberty cap, and a flag reading public confidence and public funds. At her feet is an eagle with a shield, arrows, and lightning bolts. In the captions, Downing declares, quote, "General, this is a real Cheever de Vries. You sent Clay up to pot in how nullified Calhoun made Webster a shuttlecock and busted Biddle's bank biddler." That's in some 1840s or 1830s language. Sorry. Jackson
Wow,
replies,
what a banger!
yeah, right, for sure. Yeah, that was a banger back in the day, for
You
sure.
really got him on that one.
So Jackson replies, "Hey, Major Downing, they thought they'd give us a dose of Congress water, but they find that we're bent on and we're giving them a hard poke into the bargain." He refers to support for his program spearheaded in Congress by Missouri Senator Thomas Hart Benton. So basically, what they're referring to there, this is uh, a symbol. Really, we talked about symbolism in one of our previous episodes on the Trivium, that you can pull a lot of information on here, because basically this is the entire story of behind Jackson's veto of the charter of the Second Bank of the United States. Because behind the scenes, Congress actually approved the recharter of the Second Bank of the United States. So if it weren't for Andrew Jackson, the recharter would have went through. But he went through, and I think it was in 1832, he canceled the recharter.
Yeah,
And
because he took the deposits out in 1833, and Congress actually censored him for
yes.
removing them in 1834. And for those that don't know what censure means, it's just a strongly worded, harsh criticism.
Right. Yeah. Right. Basically. Yeah. And I think this got taken all the way to the Supreme Court or something. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I won't speak on that because I don't know the exact thing behind it. But behind this is, this is the entire story behind the veto of the second charter of the Bank of the United States. And that is why I like Jackson so much. Now, you'll also hear out there in a lot of circles and stuff that the only thing that happened is that the funds went from one bank to a bunch of Rothschild state banks, which there's probably some validity to that claim. I don't know if you know anything about that, Whitestone, do you?
No, I haven't followed that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Right. It wouldn't surprise me either. But, in my opinion, Jackson did the right thing, and these bankers are going to bank, bankers be banking. So
Yep.
they're going to do what they're going to do. So there's, I'm going to live in my delusions and believe that Andrew Jackson was a great man of God, and he was truly doing what he thought was the best thing on canceling the recharter.
Wasn't he also a bit of a psychopath, kind of in a good way?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he was an absolute nut job. He got into like two
I love that.
yeah, yeah. He got into two what do you call them? Duels? Two
Yeah,
duels,
duels.
survived them both. Yeah, he kind of cheated on one too, not gonna lie. So yeah, he was an absolute nut job. But I think it kind of takes that kind of person to tank on bankers. Am I wrong?
No,
Kind
you
of
you
got
really do have to be kind of a psychopath who's willing to break the rules in order to do that kind of thing. There was an animation that had come out, it was about 5 or 6 years, maybe it's actually 10 years ago, I don't know, that kind of outlined Jackson's life. And it was sort of a funny, comedic kind of thing, but it just goes to show you just how different Jackson was. And yeah, they referred to him as kind of a psychopath, but in a good way, like a wild-haired, bright-eyed psychopath that just shot at people and beat people up.
Yeah, he was an absolute crazy. But a huge reason why so many people liked him is because of the Battle of New Orleans, which I just learned not too long ago that he was the general or captain or whatever, the top brass during the Battle of New Orleans. He won that battle, and that's basically what got him the presidency. So I mean, he was an absolute crazy person. He had stomach issues. Um, Ugly wife, but he loved her. So I mean, that's got to count for something. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Hey,
people
an
literally said she was
1800
ugly as
personality
sin.
is going to get you through. So,
Oh, for sure. He loved the woman. He loved the woman. He didn't care that she was ugly, which I admire. I thought it was great. That's awesome.
so would the moniker be like bank hater and ugly wife enjoyer?
Yeah, so yeah, so we could come up with something clever. I'm sure they did come up with something clever. I just don't know about it. But yeah, yeah. So that is the story of James Gordon Bennett and his relationship with the Second Bank of the United States. Basically his life from birth to right before he's going to start his own newspaper, and that's what we're going to talk about in hour two. So I hope to see everybody over there. All you got to do is go to truelifeproduction.com. That's no S on that, singular production, truelifeproduction.com. There's a banner up on the top that says the Learning Out Loud podcast. You click on that, click become a member. And for $8 a month, you can become a member and get all of the extra goodies that go along with the show, including the second hour that we are about to get into now, where we are going to talk about Bennett founding his New York Herald and the story that got him famous, which is the Helen Jewett murder. And we're not gonna I was gonna get into the news articles that were around the time, but they're actually really hard to find. I couldn't find in the original articles, but I did find a great retrospective. It was written about 15 years later, talking all about the case and the trial, and that gives us a really good overview of everything that was happening and everything that happened then. Because we will find out that the man who committed the murder was acquitted. So let's find out why. So hopefully we will see everybody over there on the second hour. And never forget to seek truth and honor the Creator above all, and let that be the whole of the law.
That's the important thing here, is that everyone's word should be meant for a use.
And the words that I'm using today are meant to pull down idols within people's temples.
Meaning that I want to destroy
Falsities that they have idolized.
for their entire life.
And just pull those out and sweep them clean. And before that temple,
And get reinfested with a new lie. Give it true life.